Hello! So the Booker Prize long list is going to be announced very, very soon, once this video goes up, and so I thought I would try my hand at predicting the long list again. I did this last year. I don't think I succeeded very well. I should have checked that out before I came on here. Hang on. The Colony was, Glory was. I think I only got 2 last year, that's off the top of my head. So we're going to try and do better than 2. The Booker Prize is a British book prize for any book published in English in the past year. So I have 13 books here, which is a book a dozen, so let's get into them. So first I'm going to talk about some of the returning people, either people who have won before or been shortlisted or longlisted. There are a few of them that have come out with books this year that I think could be on the list. I have not read most of these books, so I am just going off of the hype, how I've seen other people talking about them, what I've seen on Instagram and YouTube. But the first one is Salman Rushdie with Victory City. Salman Rushdie is the person who has been nominated for the most Booker prizes. He has been nominated a total of 7 times, winning once, shortlisted 4 times, and 2 times additionally making the long list. So he is no stranger to the prize. He is not someone I have ever read, although I know he is beloved of a lot of people. I think my mum kind of led me to believe he's a bit of a misogynist, but I don't know if that's true at all. It's just hearsay. But he has a new book, Victory City, and it is also his first book after he was attacked because of the fatwa against him and lost the sight in one eye. So I think this one could be on the list, and it is an epic tale, 352 pages long, so a very short epic, about a woman who breathes a fantastical empire into existence only to be consumed by it over the centuries. In the wake of an insignificant battle between 2 long-forgotten kingdoms in 14th century southern India, a 9-year-old girl has a divine encounter that will change the course of history. After witnessing the death of her mother, grief-stricken Pampa Campana becomes a vessel for the goddess Parvati, who begins to speak out of the girl's mouth. Granting her powers beyond Pampa Campana's comprehension, the goddess tells her that she will be instrumental to the rise of the great city called Biznaga, literally Victory City, the wonder of the world. Over the next 250 years, Pampa Campana's life becomes deeply interwoven with the city, from its literal sowing of a bag of magic seeds to the tragic ruination in the most human of ways, the hubris of those in power. So it's an epic. It sounds like it's going to be Salman Rushdie's typical magical realist epic, because the sound of it does remind me of one of the hallmark texts of magical realism, 100 Years of Solitude, although in this we are following just one woman. So it sounds like it's going to be up my street, actually. So I will maybe try and read that, and I definitely will if it's shortlisted. Another one from someone who has won before is Birnam Wood by Eleanor Catton. Eleanor Catton won for The Luminaries, which I really, really enjoyed. It's a very long book about the gold rush in New Zealand in the 19th century, based around zodiac signs, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really good read. Of course, when you hear, I think Birnam Wood is an actual wood in Scotland, but of course when you hear Birnam Wood, you think until Birnam Wood marches on High Dunsinane from Macbeth. So I think there are going to be some Shakespeare vibes in this one, although it is not historical, it is contemporary. 5 years ago, Mira Bunting founded a guerrilla gardening group, Birnam Wood, an undeclared, unregulated, sometimes criminal, sometimes philanthropic gathering of friends. This activist collective plants crops where no one will notice, on the sides of roads, in forgotten parts, neglected backyards. For years, the group has struggled to break even. Then Mira stumbles on an answer, a way to finally set the group up for the long term. A landslide has closed the Corowai Pass, cutting off the town of Thorndyke. Natural disaster has created an opportunity, a sizable farm seemingly abandoned. But Mira is not the only one interested in Thorndyke. Robert Lemoine, the enigmatic American billionaire, has snatched it up to build his end times bunker, or so he tells Mira when he catches her on the property. Intrigued by Mira, Birnam Wood, and their entrepreneurial spirit, he suggests they work this land. But can they trust him? As their ideas and ideologies are tested, can they trust each other? Which is described as a psychological thriller, Shakespearean in its wit, drama, and immersion in character. So that is intriguing. Obviously set in New Zealand. End times bunkers for the very rich are usually in New Zealand. It doesn't say how many pages there are in this one, because The Luminaries was enormous. 432. So, a chunky book, but not as chunky as The Luminaries. And then one that I am personally really excited to read, which comes out in September, and I have a NetGalley of it, so I can read it sooner than that, and I'm very excited to, is The Fraud by Zadie Smith. I have been really getting into Zadie Smith recently. I have a video on this channel where I review On Beauty, and so that's one of my favourite books that I've read this year, so I'm definitely excited to read Zadie Smith's new novel, which is historical fiction, which is a genre that I like. So one of my favourite writers venturing into a genre that I like is definitely something that's exciting me. Zadie Smith has been longlisted 3 times and shortlisted once, but she hasn't yet won the prize. But we'll see if she's longlisted this year. It is 1873. Mrs. Eliza Touchet is the Scottish housekeeper and cousin by marriage of a once famous novelist, now in decline, William Ainsworth, with whom she has lived for 30 years. Mrs. Touchet is a woman of many interests: literature, justice, abolitionism, class, her cousin, his wives, this life and the next. But she is also sceptical. She suspects her husband of having no talent, his successful friend Mr. Charles Dickens of being a bully and a moralist, and England of being a land of facades in which nothing is quite what it seems. Andrew Bogle meanwhile grew up enslaved on the Hoak plantation, Jamaica. He knows every lump of sugar comes at a human cost, that the rich deceive the poor, and that people are more easily manipulated than they realise. When Bogle finds himself in London, star witness in a celebrated case of imposture, he knows his future depends on telling the right story. So it's a book about storytelling, which I think is something that Zadie Smith does very well. And hopefully I will read this one soon and we'll be able to talk to you about it. Then we have The House of Doors by Twan and Twan has been longlisted twice and shortlisted once. This book is about Somerset Maugham, who is a famous playwright. He wrote Of Human Bondage, that's the one I was thinking of, and The Painted Veil. And there is also a literary prize named after him. Yeah, so this is another historical fiction novel. Maybe I am putting more historical fiction on this list than there would be, but in 1921, and at Cassowary House in the Straits settlement of Penang, Robert Hamlin is a well-to-do lawyer and his steely wife Leslie a society hostess. Their lives are invigorated when Willie, an old friend of Robert's, comes to stay. Willie Somerset Maugham is one of the greatest writers of his day, but he is beleaguered by an unhappy marriage, ill health and business interests that have gone badly awry. He also struggles to write. The more Leslie's friendship with Willie grows, the more clearly she sees him as he is, a man who has no choice but to mask his true self. As Willie prepares to leave and face his demons, Leslie can find secrets of her own, including how she came to know the charismatic Dr. Sun Yat-sen, a revolutionary fighting to overthrow the imperial dynasty of China. And more scandalous still, she reveals her connection to a case of an Englishwoman charged with murder in the Kuala Lumpur courts, a tragedy drawn from fact but worthy of fiction. I believe Somerset Maugham was gay. I believe that's what he's hiding and masking of his true self in this novel. And it sounds really interesting to me, so I hope it is shortlisted. I think I probably will read it anyway. And then I have one more that's not technically someone who has been shortlisted, longlisted for the Booker Prize before, but it is someone who has won 2 very big prizes this year, and this is The Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. So Barbara Kingsolver has never been shortlisted or longlisted for the Booker Prize, which I'm kind of surprised about. But she did win this year the Women's Prize and the Pulitzer Prize for Demon Copperhead, which is another one of my favourite books of this year, so I hope that it will be longlisted at least. Demon Copperhead tells the story of Demon, who is a young boy growing up in 90s Appalachia. It is about his in rural poverty, and it is about the experience of rural poverty by this one boy told through the story of the life of David Copperfield. It follows the beats of that story, although not exactly, but it follows his life through the foster system, through addiction in his family, and through becoming a football star, and the way that the opioid crisis affected this part of the world, the way poverty and racism and structures of abuse affected this part of the world. It's a very interesting book, really well written, really voicey and wonderful. The characters really come to life. It has a lot of the comedy that you would expect from a Dickens, but much more modern and up to date, and I really enjoyed it. So I really hope, again, that this one is longlisted, shortlisted, I don't know, but I think it's really good. So I have 5 books on my list that are debut novels. There were several debut novels on the long list last year, I think, and debut novels have won the Booker before, so it's not unusual, but of course I don't have any frame of reference for these writers, and I haven't read any of them. I've just seen a lot of hype around them. So the first one is Calla by Colin Walsh, which makes me think whenever I hear it of the song Calla My Friend, but that is by a Zambian author, and this is about 3 friends reunited on the Irish West Coast, so I don't think they are related to each other at all. But this one has been shortlisted for the Waterstones debut prize for fiction. Several of the ones that I've picked have been shortlisted for the debut prize from Waterstones, and I didn't pick them because they were on that list, but I guess that is part of the reason that they've been so hyped and I've heard about them so much. The marketing for Calla when it came out was very strong. It was absolutely everywhere on my timeline. In the seaside town of Kinloch on Ireland's west coast, 3 old friends are thrown together for the first time in years. They, Helen, Joe and Mush, were part of an original group of 6 inseparable teenagers in the summer of 2003, with motherless, reckless Carla Lannan as the group's white-hot centre. Soon after the summer's peak, Carla disappeared without a trace. Now it's 15 years later. Helen has reluctantly returned to Ireland for her father's wedding. Joe is a world-famous musician newly back in town, and Mush has never left, too scared to venture beyond the counter of his mother's cafe. But human remains have been discovered in the woods. 2 more girls have gone missing, and as past and present begin to collide, the estranged friends are forced to confront their own complicity in the events that led to Carla's disappearance, and to try to stop Kinloch's violent patterns repeating themselves once again. Sounds interesting. It does remind me a bit of, is it Tana French? Is that her name? The Dublin Murders, the first one. There are vibes of that, which was a good book, and I think something a bit thrilling. I don't know, I know there has been a thriller that has won the Booker Prize before, so it's not out of the question that something thrilling could be included, but I'm intrigued. I also have put The Long Form by Kate Briggs on this list, and that is because I know the Booker often likes more like experimental, interesting books that are doing something different with the form of the novel, and this book I feel like is a non-fiction fiction kind of. It's hard to see which side of the line it falls on, but Fitzcarraldo, who published it, have put it in their blue cover, not their white cover, so they are definitely classing it as fiction, and I think it would just about qualify. And it is one that I'm really intrigued by. So Kate Briggs, this is her first novel, but she has written non-fiction before and is a translator, so has published works in translation that she has translated. It is early morning and there's a whole new day ahead. How will it unfold? The baby will feed. Hopefully she'll sleep. Helen looks out of the window. The Long Form is the story of 2 people composing a day together. It is a day of movements and improvisations, common and uncommon rhythms, stopping and starting again. As the morning progresses, a book, The History of Tom Jones by Henry Fielding, gets delivered, and the scope of the day widens further. Matters of care work share ground with matters of friendship, housing, translation, aesthetics and creativity. Small incidents of the day revive some of the oldest preoccupations of the novel: the force of social circumstance, the power of names, the meaning and duration of the work, and the work of love. This next one is the one I am least sure about. I mean, I'm not particularly sure about any of them, but this one I think I would be most surprised if it definitely was on the list, even though it's on my list, if that makes any sense. But it is Mrs. S by Kay Patrick, which is another one that I have seen a lot of people talking about, but I feel like might be a little more genre-y than some of the other ones. In an elite English boarding school where the girls kiss the marble statues of the famous dead author who used to walk the halls, a young Australian woman arrives to take up the antiquated role of matron. Within this landscape of immense privilege, in which the girls can sense the slightest weakness in those around them, she finds herself unsure of her role, her accent and her body. That is until she meets Mrs. S, the headmaster's wife, a woman who is her polar opposite, assured, sophisticated, a paragon of femininity. Over the course of a long, restless heatwave, the matron finds herself irresistibly drawn ever closer into Mrs. S's world, and their unspoken desire blooms into an illicit affair of electric intensity. But as the summer begins to fade, both women know a choice must be made. It's a portrait of the butch experience, exploring contested terrain of our bodies, our desire, and the constraint society places around them. It's been praised by a lot of different authors. A lot of people have been talking about it and raving about it, and so I think potentially it could be on the list. It sounds intriguing from that synopsis. One that is one of the anticipated releases for me that I would like to read, although it came out in March. I'm not very good at keeping up with the books I'm interested in when they come out, but I was interested in this one when I first heard about it, is In Memoriam by Alice Wynn, and this one has also been shortlisted for the Waterstones debut prize for fiction. And this is set in the First World War. World War books are not usually my thing, but I do think that they do fairly well in prizes. That's a theory that's coming from the top of my head, because I can think of some. The English Patient, for example. Regeneration, that one also won the Booker. So, maybe. It's 1914 and talk of war feels far away to Henry Gaunt, Sidney Elwood and the rest of their classmates, safely ensconced in their idyllic boarding school in the English countryside. At 17, they're too young to enlist anyway. Gaunt is fighting his own private battle, an all-consuming infatuation with his best friend, the dreamy, poetic Elwood, not having a clue that Elwood is in love with him, always has been. When Gaunt's German mother asks him to enlist as an officer in the British Army to protect their family from anti-German attack, Gaunt signs up immediately, relieved to escape his overwhelming feelings for Elwood. The front is horrific, of course, and though Gaunt tries to dissuade Elwood from joining him on the battlefield, Elwood soon rushes in, spurred on by his love of Greek heroes and romantic poetry. Before long, their classmates have followed suit. Once in the trenches, Elwood and Gaunt find fleeting moments of solace in one another. Their friends are all dying right in front of them, and at any moment. And this one's been played by like Maggie O'Farrell and Garth Greenwell and Claire Fuller. So a lot of people who are like prize winners, not necessarily this prize, but it is one that I was intrigued by, as I said, when I first heard about it, and I've heard all of the people who've read it that I have seen have really enjoyed it. Next we have Chain Gang All Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. And this one first came onto my radar because Matthew Sharappa talked about it and he really enjoyed it. A future dystopia, which I definitely think is a little too genre-y, potentially, but it is kind of satirical, and there were several satires on last year's shortlist even. There was Glory by Novelists and The Trees by Percival Everett, so I think there's something satirical is not unknown of making it to the prize long list. And this one has also been shortlisted for the Waterstones debut prize. Welcome to Chain Gang All Stars, the highly popular, highly controversial, profit-raising program inside America's private prison system. Harkening back to the time of the gladiators, but watched by millions of live stream subscribers, prisoners compete for the ultimate prize, their freedom. Loretta Thurwar and Hamara Hurricane Stacker, teammates and lovers, are the fan favourites. If all goes well, Thurwar will be free in just a few matches, a fact she carries as heavily as her lethal hammer. But will the price simply be too high? It's a very simple premise, but yeah, I'm intrigued. And a lot of people, again, have, since I saw Matthew Sharappa talk about this, I've heard a lot of other people talk about it too, and seems to be a lot of love for this novel. The final three novels are not by debut authors, but they are also not authors who have been Booker people before. But I have heard lots of good things about these as well. The first one is Cuddy by Benjamin Myers. And this is another one that is interesting in terms of form, because it combines diary, real historical events, poetries, plays, prose. So it reminds me in that of the Lincoln one, the one about Lincoln in the Bardo, which won a few years ago, because that was such a combination of those like real historical sources and then also the prose of the weirdness of the Bardo. I really love that book. Cuddy is a bold and experimental retelling of the story of the hermit St Cuthbert, unofficial patron saint of the north of England. Cuddy straddles historical eras, from the first Christian-slaying Viking invaders of the holy island of Lindisfarne in the 8th century to contemporary England defined by class and austerity. Along the way we meet brewers and masons, archers and academics, monks and labourers, their visionary voices and stories echoing through their ancestors and down the ages. And all the while at the centre sits Durham Cathedral and the lives of those who live and work around this place of pilgrimage, their dreams, desires, connections and communities. So yeah, I think the interesting form is the one that really made this one stand out to me as possibly being on the list. The next one is also experimental and weird, and like I'm intrigued, and I think the premise is super funny, is Open Throat by Henry Hoak, that I've heard a lot of people talking about, and it is about a gay mountain lion, a queer and dangerously hungry mountain lion. And it's been described as a fever dream of a novel. So I think that this fits Booker weirdness very well, more so than any of the others, I think. And there was a book narrated by animals last year, Glory, by Novelists, so another book from the perspective of an animal is not out of the question. A lonely, lovable, queer mountain lion lives in the drought-devastated land under the Hollywood sign. Fascinated by the voices around them, the lion spends their days protecting a nearby homeless encampment, observing hikers complain about their trauma and, in quiet moments, grappling with the complexities of their own identity. When a man-made fire engulfs the encampment, the lion is forced from the hills down into the city the hikers call LA. As they confront a carousel of temptations and threats, the line takes us on a tour that spans the cruel inequalities of Los Angeles. But even when salvation finally seems within reach, they are forced to face the ultimate question: do they want to eat a person or become one? Yeah, there's so much praise for this novel, so much praise, more than any of the other ones. I think that kind of weirdness does fit with Booker. And then the final one is one that I'm hoping to read like next week, like actually read very, very soon. And that is The Covenant of Water by Abraham Vergese. Abraham Vergese. Someone told me I was pronouncing it wrong in my comments. And this is another historical fiction and set in Kerala. Spanning the years 1900 to 1977, The Covenant of Water follows a family in southern India that suffers a peculiar affliction. In every generation, at least one person dies by drowning. And in Kerala, water is everywhere. At the turn of the century, a 12-year-old girl, grieving the death of her father, is sent by boat to her wedding, where she will meet her 40-year-old husband for the first time. From this poignant beginning, the young girl and future matriarch, known as Big Amachi, will witness unthinkable changes at home and at large over the span of her extraordinary life, full of the joys and trials of love and the struggles of hardship. As I said, I hope to read this one soon, so even if it's not long-listed, I will have read this one. And I have already read David Copperfield. I will be reading The Fraud, but the rest of them, it really will depend on the Booker judges, whether I read them soon or not. But those are my predictions. They're probably wildly inaccurate. If I get more than 2, I will be best pleased. Let me know your predictions, your thoughts in the comments down below, whether you care about the prize or not. Let me know that too. And I will talk to you again very soon. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.